Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude. Welcome. Today, I am speaking with Karalyn Schmidt. She is a full-time fitness program manager and a personal trainer. Outside of her full-time job, she's involved at a high school where she serves as the assistant varsity field hockey coach and also coaches individuals who are training for various running races. Running is her favorite activity, and she's currently training to run her dream race, the Boston Marathon, this April. Some of her favorite things in life are spending quality time with friends and family, on coffee dates, hiking, or boating on summer weekends at her family's lake house. Karalyn has a heart of service and is thankful for all of the areas in life that God has her where she can reach to others and encourage, motivate, and empower them. She hopes that her life story is a light of hope for others and a testament to who God is and what he's done in her life. Welcome, Karalyn. How are you today?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and
I'm
talk
so
to you.
excited for you to be here too. You know, we met each other virtually, and it's just been amazing how connected we've become.
Yeah, it was really crazy just from a simple just message and how it's kind of developed. It's pretty cool. Definitely a God thing, and I'm very blessed.
I am too, and it is definitely a God thing. You know, he's been doing a lot of that for me during this season while I've kind of been a little more restricted on where I can go and what I can do. And it's really neat to see um, social media and the virtual reality have these real connections with people that you can actually go and talk to them on the phone and get off of, you know, the different apps and things and have a real relationship. So I love seeing the internet used for good, and it's used for bad in so many places, but God's really been using it a lot, I think, since the pandemic started for good.
Oh yeah, yeah, and just I don't know, I've just been recognizing little ways he kind of just drops different people into my life at just the right time. So it's just really cool to see how it all kind of just plays out, and we don't always see that right away, in the moment, but then you take a step back and you're like, oh wow, okay, I see what you're doing there. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I love looking back. I'm a journaler, and I love that because when you look back, it just reminds you, we forget so much stuff. I mean, I forget yesterday most of the time,
Yeah.
you know, and God is so good. And so I think journaling is great because you can be reminded over and over again of all the things he did for you.
Oh yeah, I love writing. It's my favorite thing to do. So I have plenty of journals. But it's so helpful to look back and just see your growth, but also see how God's kind of been in it. And it's just, yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. Now, I always like to start at the beginning. Some people love that. Some people do not like going all the way back to childhood. But would you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the oldest of three. Grew up just with very supportive family. Had great parents. We were grew up in a Christian home, so I always just remember going to church every week and being involved there, whether it was with vacation Bible school or just Sunday school, different activities going on. Definitely was started young with faith, which is such a blessing, and I
Yeah.
definitely took it for granted at first and didn't realize how much that impacted my life, but very thankful that my parents had that priority in our lives and helped guide us as we were kind of growing in our faith. I think because I grew up in a Christian family, I definitely I guess I asked Christ into my heart when I was really young, so didn't really understand too much about it. I was probably 5 maybe.
Oh, wow. I
Yeah,
was young.
very young. I just remember like being in my bed and was just like, all right, like Jesus, like I believe, that you came and died for us and, just said the prayer, the typical prayer. But I remember that I kept asking him back into my heart because I was afraid that, oh, if I messed up or I felt like I didn't do something that he would approve of, I was like, oh no, like I lost my salvation. So
Oh,
it
wow.
definitely was a very very young and raw faith and stuff, but it was just kind of based in that like, all right, like I have to almost earn his love for a little bit. And I think it kind of that idea kind of plays out in my life, like as I'm looking back and like reflecting on that.
Hmm.
But like regardless, just continue to just be involved like with church and always had a heart for learning and growing and was just involved with mission like several missions trips growing up and those were impactful for my life. So anyway, again, like those moments when I was young just laid the foundation for where my faith is today. Definitely was a introverted, quiet child. Didn't have too many like large groups of friends. Kind of always kept it small, but was very involved with sports. That was a big thing in
Hmm.
my life growing up. Played soccer and softball, and then later played field hockey throughout college. So that was a huge part of my life. My family was always active. Loves doing things outside, so that was a huge part of our childhood. I loved. I just remember taking vacations to different states throughout the years, and it was just a great way to experience kind of a little bit of everything in life. So I feel like just growing up was just it was just a great time just to spend with friends, family, and just continue to develop my faith as I, experienced life and kept going through.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a really nice balanced, not even just, I was going to say an array of things, but you did. You had, even though you're introverted, you had sports. And so that allows you to kind of have the team aspect
Hmm.
and, still get away with maybe being quiet, but still working together well with others. You
Yeah.
had a faith piece and you had trips. And it sounds like your family was very close. So it sounds like a really nice childhood. And you had told me in our pre-recording call that you think you really developed your own faith at summer camp in the Poconos. And it's funny when you're talking about accepting Christ at 5 and kind of re-accepting over and over again and not being sure. I think about this time when we were planting a church plant, and so most of the time when there's like an altar call or someone's from the front asking people to pray a prayer to accept Jesus, your eyes are closed,
Yeah.
But because I was helping, my eyes were open and I was standing in the back and I would see there were certain people that every single week would raise their hands. And it
Yeah.
reminded me of that when you were talking about that. And I think it's this childlike misunderstanding.
Mhm.
You don't really know who Jesus is yet.
Right.
And it really stuck out to me when you said that because I that was my first memory were the people that kept raising their hand. And on one hand, I think it's beautiful because a child wants to think that they've got it right because they know who Jesus is and they want to be with him, but
Yeah.
they also don't understand that it's not like they can't do everything right.
Yeah.
And those new people doing that, raising their hand every week, they were newer Christians, and so they were children too. So I just thought it was funny God brought that picture back.
Yeah. That's cool.
So when you developed your own faith at your summer camp, like what happened when you came home? Did everything stick?
Yeah, I definitely struggled with that a lot. I just always remember, I mean, I went to this camp since like kindergarten with my best friend, and every summer, year after year, we would go together, spend a week there. Always just a great time to be mentored by younger counselors and spend time with like worship time with like the guest speakers each week that we were there. So it was just a great way to like experience like God's presence, and you always just get filled and you're just on fire for the Lord. And they would always challenge us to to continue to bring that back into life, into your daily life. But it definitely was hard. I definitely felt like it was always like my mountaintop experience or spiritual
Yeah.
high, and I never really truly just adopted it into like my lifestyle. I felt it was just like, all right, that was great, great time, met a lot of friends,
Yeah.
yay, like let's just continue on with life. And like, it was in the summer, so you get caught up with like vacations or sports activities, and it just never, yeah, it was just every year, it was just like the same thing. You get that high and then you kind of come down. And I think I definitely felt guilty in a sense
Yeah.
from that, just being like, oh, like, does God, like, is he disappointed that I'm not truly living out, like, am I being a good Christian? Like, I feel like I always was asking myself that question, like, if I'm not living like my life like I was living my life at camp, like, does that make me any less of a Christian? Like, how does that affect God's love for me? So it was definitely hard. But again, I think it kind of goes to show that how, like, still young and like immature my faith was. Like, I
Yeah.
certainly grew and was challenged to think differently outside the box a little bit, but I still didn't quite grasp what faith
Yeah.
meant.
Yeah, and
Um,
it seems to me, and I've helped with youth group, and I've been in youth group, and it seems to me that we don't have enough people that are leading youth group that are honest and real and that
right.
keep asking questions or bring up things like that about what it's like when you really go back into the classroom, you go back into your everyday life. How do you deal with the discrepancies between what the kingdom is and what the world is? I mean, that's hard for adults,
Yeah.
you know, and you're talking about brains that aren't fully formed, hormones that are crazy, emotions that are
Sure.
huge. You know, that age is so pivotal, I think. And I think we need people pouring into kids at that age who are really mentoring them or discipling them from a place of this is what happened to me, this is what it's like for me, I struggle, and sharing. Like, I think when I share with people the things I struggle with, they're like, what?
Right. Yeah.
We struggle? Yeah, we all do. It'd be real easy to kind of polish yourself up and try to look a certain way, but I think we do better with being real. And that's what biblical community's for, right? So
Yeah.
when you need something, you call me or text me, and when I need something, I call you or text you, and we're there for each other, and we're able to remind each other and point the way back to God.
Yeah, it's like refreshing too because you don't feel like you have to pretend all the time. And I think just growing up, I always felt like my faith had to be perfect. Like, I
Yeah,
had to read my Bible every day, and if I didn't, something was wrong, or if I didn't pray as much, like, something was wrong. So it just, you kind of get painted this picture that, like, you have to have all, like, your, everything in line, and, like, it has to be great and perfect, and you can't struggle or
yeah.
have doubt or, like, fear or anything like that, because then it just, well, then your faith doesn't mean anything. So
That probably caused a lot of anxiety and
yeah.
pressure.
Oh, for sure. And I definitely, well, still am, but, like, a people pleaser. So, like, that is, like, a huge, part
Yeah.
of my life, and just not, like, feeling I have to live up to certain expectations that I feel like are placed on me, whether or not that's actually true or not. So,
Yeah, but if you're feeling they are, it doesn't matter whether they were.
right.
It's a reality for you. It's
Exactly.
just like if somebody has an emotion in regards to something, the other person doesn't understand it. That doesn't mean the emotion isn't valid.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Wow. Well, in eighth grade, you got a diagnosis that I think, as we've talked this bit, really as a result a lot of these pressures and different things that were going on, and the anxieties that were produced. You got a diagnosis that was really pivotal. Would you tell us about that time?
Yeah. So the second, like, half of my eighth grade year, I developed anorexia. It definitely was a slow kind of progress and, like, development. It didn't really start off, I don't think, with one specific cause, or at least from what I
Hmm.
can remember.
Hmm.
But just, again, at the time, I was very involved with my sports and just training for, like, soccer, and have just developed that sense of, like, being a competitor and, like, an athlete, and just, again, wanting to perform and do my best, both on the field, off the field, and just, it kind of got wrapped up in this, like, need for control. And I think that's
Yeah.
comes down to it in a sense, and what kind of drove my, like, actions, as far as the
Hmm.
eating disorder went. And yeah, just the belief that, like, my performance gave me, like, purpose and made others love me, and that, like, that lie that I believed deep down was, like, I'm not enough if,
Yeah.
I look like a certain way, or if I don't do this or don't do that. So I just remember, it kind of just started off like small things where, I just got this idea in my head of, like, oh, well, if so and so is doing something, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do it better or do it more. I remember just like being more, I guess, aware of sometimes like the negative like food talk in our family as well.
Yeah.
Um, I remember just being aware of just how like my parents would sometimes say like, oh, this food is bad, this food is good, or if we eat a bad food, like, oh, we have to go exercise or work out. Again,
Oh,
a simple
yeah.
joke kind of in a sense, but to me it was like, oh wow, like what if that's actually
Yeah.
true? Like what if, so you start to kind of question yourself and you're like, well, maybe I can control that and I can be healthier and eliminate certain things and but continue to train and kind of use like my like identity as like an athlete to kind of hide some of
Yeah.
that stuff. And it kind of developed from there. It just went from eliminating a few things from my diet or from my life, and then to like more and more. Like I remember we did like those 30-hour famine events with like my
Yeah.
youth
I
group.
remember those. Uh-huh.
Right. And like it was my first one. And I ended up doing it like I think a day or two ahead, or behind of like the actual youth group because I was involved with theater like in our middle school.
Hmm.
And my mom didn't want me like, on the stage performing with the lights and, not eating, for 30 hours. So
Right.
anyway, so we adjusted. So I was kind of like on my own in the sense doing it. And I just remember at the end of it, wanting to continue, kind of be like, oh, like I did really good with that. I'm gonna
Hmm.
keep going, or like how long can I continue the fast, like and so it became more of like it definitely wasn't like a faith thing. More so it was like, all right, how can
Right.
I use this to feed my need for control or to like be healthy or like
Yeah.
um so that was a huge thing I remember. And then just from there, I just kept like, eliminating different foods like from my diet with like, Lent. Like we never really celebrated as like a family, but
Hmm.
when you're in middle school and your friends like, oh, I'm giving up such and such, I'm giving up this, and I'm like, okay, great. So it just like little behaviors like that kind of just fed
Yeah.
into this development of anorexia. And I used like my sports and like working out as like my like way of just like feeling like I had to earn my food. So I would just over exercise all the time. I wouldn't
Hmm.
eat. So at first it was hard to see. And I think it got to a point where, like my parents started to like see that because
Yeah.
you only can hide losing weight for so much until like you
Yeah.
physically like show it on your body and stuff. So it was definitely a drawn out thing. And again, it got worse and worse and worse. And I think, um, when I finally got diagnosed, like my parents took me to like my doctor and she was like, "Oh yeah, like this is what you have." And for me, I feel like I didn't really know what like I didn't know what it was. I feel like I never really heard about eating disorders or like anorexia or bulimia. Like that just wasn't like a terminology like that was used
Yeah.
around me. So it just was like, I have what? Like it was very confusing, I think, at
It
first.
sounds like it. And I was talking to some, I say young friends, but anyone younger than me really is necessarily young, but some younger friends. And we were talking about kind of being aware and how they've had times in their life where they were very aware of what they were eating or needing to exercise or feeling like someone said they looked really great at a time where they had maybe not even on purpose lost some weight, and that those things stuck and they started forming like real identity in them, that okay, that this is something I need to do. And then look at all of the social media
Yeah.
and everything out there. You're supposed to look this way, weigh this much, wear this, buy that, live here.
Hmm.
It's just kind of crazy how much influence is piling in on this one child.
Right.
I mean, it sounds so overwhelming.
Yeah, and like I even remember back, it was probably like before middle school, maybe like upper elementary school. We had been
Mhm.
on a vacation in California, and I remember I think it was my first time I feel like I was aware of myself in terms of like my body image.
Yeah.
I remember, putting on an outfit and looking at myself in the mirror in our hotel room and just being like, oh, like I look fat today, or these pants make me look fat. Like a fleeting thought. Kind of, I don't remember anything else about that vacation that affected that.
Yeah.
But just like again, it's sad to see that's like those little thoughts. Like it kind of, I mean, it sticks with you. You think it's just there and gone, but it kind of
Yeah.
just is like in there. And then when things start to kind of, like you said, you get these influence, like these, quote unquote harmless comments from people,
Hmm.
you know, you just take it to heart more because you're like, oh, is that actually true? Like, what if it is?
Yeah.
And like, how does that, affect how people think of me or, how I think of myself? So,
It's so much pressure. I mean, I had my own issues when I was younger, but when you're little, you're meant to be carefree. And I
mhm.
think by the time that you're old enough to have to work and even go to college, before work, that you have to really let go of that carefree lifestyle by that point. So when you don't really get it before that time, that must really do something to you.
Yeah, I just remember it was a terrible time. Like it just was probably I think it was like one of my first experiences with like depression and like anxiety and just
Yeah.
struggle in life. Like I feel like up until that point, nothing really terrible had happened in my life.
Yeah.
And just was as an eighth grader. I mean, I guess that's 14, I'm like 13, 14 years old. Like just to kind of be hit with all that like trauma in a sense is just it's overwhelming. And when you don't know what to do and you just all you have is that eating disorder, like kind of just controlling you, and that like I always say it's like a voice in my head. Like I called him Ed, like I named
Yeah.
it. So hearing him tell me things and I didn't know is that true, and it was so like enslaving, and so I felt like
Mm.
I couldn't get out of it, and so it was all just wrapped up, and it was just like this mess, and I think it just continued just like the spiral and spiral like out of control.
Yeah.
Even though I thought I was
Yeah.
in control, it was completely out of control.
Well, I do. I get this picture of, and this is probably strange, but I'll say it anyway because I am strange. But like as you were talking, I got this picture of like all the different things, like the things people said, the things people that you thought, the voices that you heard, what the world was saying, and every little thing was being put on a sticky note and just being put on top of you.
Yeah,
And like as you were talking, you were just covered with sticky notes,
yeah,
and I couldn't see you anymore. And it was just such a neat image, like
yeah,
it was just layer after layer after layer of things. Like you said, they were all little things. Like a sticky note's not big,
right.
but when there's 1,000 other sticky notes,
Yeah. It's hard to, I
wow.
mean, it blinds you. You don't really realize. And like when you're starving yourself, like it
Yeah.
affects like your brain function. I literally feel like I couldn't concentrate in school. And instead of like focusing on like schoolwork, I would like write calories on my like planner
Mm,
and like plan out like what I'd eaten that day, how could I exercise to like, it was just like a constant, and you wear yourself out because that's all you're thinking about. And so you don't have like, you don't show up like as yourself and your family with like friends and
yeah. Yeah.
church. And so it's very isolating when you feel like there's no one who's talking to you except for the voice in your head, and all that is negative and just
Yeah.
destructive. So
Yeah. And having been somebody who was really known as the athletic
yeah.
person, so what happened there? I'm sure at some point you weren't able to be athletic. It wasn't healthy.
Yeah, so that was huge. When it kind of got to a point where I was just losing like just a drastic amount of weight, my doctor and like was just told me I can't play unless I gained a certain amount of weight back. I wasn't able to play,
Mhm.
which there's a few things that I feel like even today it kind of makes me cringe a little bit because I think there wasn't that understanding of, recovering from anorexia or eating disorders isn't just about gaining weight back. It's because there's so much
Yes.
more, behind, like, sure, the behaviors with like the food and over exercising and those methods are like ways of kind of driving that energy into it, but it's not really the root cause or like the root issue. And so I think just
Yeah.
when someone tells like a kid, hey, you need to gain weight, like that's just very scary. For me, it was a very scary thing, and I was like, well, how do I don't know how to do that because I want to play
Yeah.
sports, but I don't want to gain weight because I
Yeah.
associate gaining weight with being fat, and it's just again these cycles in your head. So it definitely was hard. I think I was kind of embarrassed too to like tell my coaches and tell my teammates and have to explain to people
Yeah.
like, oh, like why can't you play? I was like, well, I'm sick, or like you kind of like have to make up these excuses, and then it's just like a very shameful thing that you're like
Yeah.
holding on to, like it's like a burden. You're just like, oh my gosh, like I can't let go of this, but like it makes me feel this way, and so you're kind of just being, I feel like I'm being
It
like
does.
stretched,
It doesn't sound like you had anywhere to go with it.
No, so it just, yeah, so it was like it was devastating to not have like to not be able to play, but unfortunately I still did exercises, and like I would hide in my room and I would do like sit-ups and push-ups,
Mm,
before bed, or I would go on runs. Like I would run. It would be freezing outside. I would still like I'd force myself to go. I still found ways,
yeah,
because then it was more of like resistance against like my parents and like my doctor and all that kind of stuff. Is like, well, they're telling me this, so I'm going to do something else because that makes
yeah.
me feel empowered and in control, if they're telling me I can't do other things. So it definitely, that was definitely a struggle. And, I think it kind of played into like the body image thing too, because, I've always been known to have an athletic like build and just be strong. And I think that just got so wrapped up in like, oh no, if I can't play sports and I can't do this and that, are people going to
Yeah.
see me in a different light? Is that going to affect how much they love me or if I'm enough for them? So,
I'm getting like weighed down and anxious just listening to what you were going through, to be honest. Like it
yeah,
sounds like it must have been so difficult. And like the mama in me wants to give that that age you like such a big hug right now. Oh my gosh.
yeah.
That's a lot. Did you ever try to go to God? Did you get angry with God because things were like kind of chaotic? How did you respond to God at that time, or did you?
Yeah, it definitely, I don't think was a great time for my faith. I feel that I was more just angry and just like so lost in like depression and anxiety that I didn't I didn't know what to pray. I was just like, God, why is this
Yeah.
happening to me? Like, why do I feel so miserable yet I can't get myself out of this and I can't, free myself from it. And so I definitely isolated from like youth group and church and like I didn't want to do those things. I didn't want to like hang out with people who, were trying to help or I pushed people away who were trying to help too. And I think I pushed him away as well. Just being like,
Yeah.
well, if you're not gonna help and fix this, with like the snap of your fingers, why am I gonna trust you? And I think it just kind of goes to show like my faith like was just so raw. So it's like to have something like this happen, you're just like, oh my gosh, like what do I do? And like, thinking
Yeah.
that I had to fix it on my own when in reality, like God's the one who, can bring about that freedom and we don't have to do it on our own. So it definitely a low moment faith wise for sure.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that those moments are what give us like a springboard
Hmm.
towards stepping towards him and getting the real close relationship. I think we have to get to some of those places sometimes where nobody else can help us and we can't fix it ourselves, where we actually really fall down on our knees and cry out.
Yeah. No, I remember just thinking back and even I have like journals from that time and I usually read them over every single year just to kind of be reminded and to like reflect and just yeah like just seeing like the
Yeah.
pain that I was going through like on the pages of like my journal and stuff and just like
Wow.
just being so like just flat out honest with God and being like this sucks like you suck like all this kind of stuff
Yeah.
but the fact that again looking back and I think as we'll talk later just like in the months to come
Hmm.
like how like God showed up and I was like, oh, like okay,
Yeah.
like I'm not alone, like
Yeah.
we'll be okay. I'll get through this and stuff. So
Yeah. Now you went to treatment centers and you saw nutritionists.
hmm.
What was that process like? Were they able to help you?
Yeah, so it was kind of rocky, honestly. When it got to a point where my like everyone was very concerned for me, my mom took me to a bunch of different like local treatment centers just to kind of get a feel for what they were about because again this is all new for our family. This is nothing, nothing really in
Hmm.
life prepares you to deal with something like this, so we didn't really
Yeah.
know what we were doing. And a lot of the centers that we like looked at like they didn't have like a faith aspect, and just my mom just never felt comfortable. I just remember her like saying like I can't leave you here, like I can't leave you here, and just having that like
Yeah.
gut reaction of like this is not what you're supposed to do. Like I don't know what your help is going to look like, but she couldn't leave me at these places. So
Can we
I
put a
mean,
pin right there? I think
yeah,
that's so beautiful that even though she didn't know what the answer was, she knew as someone who loved you and wanted to protect you and take care of you that what you were looking at wasn't it. I think
yeah.
that's beautiful that God gave her that knowledge.
Yeah, it definitely was good. And I feel like up until this point I was very just at war with my parents and just felt like they were trying to like control me and make me eat and make me do all this stuff. And when it was out of protection and love. And again, like they didn't know what they were doing and they're just trying to do the best they can. And so I
Yeah.
definitely appreciate that, she got that from like that feeling from God, because I don't know what my like recovery would have looked like if I had gone to a place like that. So again, it's just
Yeah.
another reminder of like God kind of,
Yeah.
working the little cracks and crevices like of some brokenness, and just kind of putting that like, that thought or that feeling in your mind that kind of redirects you into where he's calling us. So that was cool. And I've been seeing like a dietitian, at the time, who was kind of monitoring like my eating and stuff. And as far as therapists, I didn't really, I mean, we saw a few people, but nothing really kind
Yeah.
of helped. So that kind of affected, and kind of,
Yeah.
took some of that extra help away. So definitely it was several months, I think, that we were trying to like find like what's the right help and like what are we supposed to do? Because, I
Well,
needed
yeah,
help.
you never dealt with it before. Nobody knew what they were doing. You were trying to find help. I would imagine that was a really kind of scary time.
Yeah, you almost feel like an experiment in a sense, where
Yeah.
it's just like you're going to the doctor's visits, you're seeing dietitians, you're trying to find a therapist, and it's just like all the while trying to like balance everything going on in your head. You're just like, I feel so helpless, but like it's just, yeah, it was very overwhelming and very, discouraging at some points too.
It's funny. I never really connected this before, but so I have been diagnosed with three autoimmune diseases. I currently have absolutely no symptoms at all, and God is amazing.
That's
But
awesome.
I did. And when they were trying to figure out the one, which ended up being chronic fatigue syndrome,
Mhm.
it took them like, I don't know, 10 months to diagnose it. So
Mhm.
during that time, I look fine. I feel horrible. I know everything's off and wrong. I didn't know what was going on. I felt scared. I felt like I'd never be normal again. My whole life felt upside down. And I remember just that feeling of I don't even know how to put it in words, but as you were talking, it was like, oh, I understand the inkling of what you're talking about from
Mhm.
that time. And to be on the other side of it is wonderful. But when you're in it and nobody really was taking it seriously, and they were doing all the tests and all the things, but it took so long that it didn't feel like anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and just like even to not have like the terminology to deal with it, like,
Yeah.
my parents and like friends and people would just be like, just eat, just do this, or just
Yeah.
relax. And it's just like that doesn't, they just don't have the skills. It's nothing against them. It's just you just don't know. And you're trying to, as a kid, like I was, trying to explain people like this is how this makes me feel. But again, I didn't
Hmm.
know how to tell people how I felt. Like my family didn't really, I don't know, I feel like emotions are something that is not as like talked about like in my family. And like
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't know how to express everything that I was feeling. So like I would journal, or
Yeah.
angry pray to God, but so like to be
Yeah.
able to like explain that for them to receive it, and just like it just wasn't able to mesh well. And I think it just, yeah, it kind of, I mean, broke our family a little bit. And it just was, we're like in a boat that was
Yeah.
sinking, with like trying to, with our oars, like trying to paddle in all different directions. You're just kind of like spinning
Wow.
around, and like, meanwhile,
Uh,
the boat just keeps on sinking. So,
wow. Now, but God, right? So there
yeah.
was there was a powerful God moment
Hmm.
when a woman from the church that you grew up in reached out to your mom. Can you tell us about that? What happened?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it was through Facebook or some type of way. The church I grew up in, yeah, there was a family, and we were somewhat close with them. But I guess their older daughter had gone through an eating disorder and had went to this treatment center. And when this lady heard, like, what I was going through, and maybe my mom knew about their daughter. I'm not exactly sure all the details, but somehow they got kind of connected. And this lady reached out to my mom, was like, "Hey, like, my daughter, like, she's dealing with the same stuff. She's seen this treatment center down. It was in Virginia at the time, so she's like,
Hmm.
it's a Christian centered place. Why don't you just check it out? Like, give them a call. So she kind of just put this place in my mom's like lap. And I remember my parents looking it up. It was called Bermuda Ranch.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I think they just saw it, and like I think that was like their God moment too, just being like, wow, like this is where you're supposed to be. And
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah.
mean, it scared them. I mean, it scared me, but just like having that just kind of come almost when, like, that was probably June-ish probably of that year, we're almost at like we have nothing left. Like we don't know what else to do.
Uh-huh.
Kind of God just kind of dropped that in, and like it ended up being kind of exactly what like we all needed.
That's
Definitely a leap of
amazing.
faith.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, it was. And like I think it was in that moment that I feel that kind of something inside me kind of clicked and was just like, all right, I don't know how this is going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I know I need help. I think I got to a point where it's just like that one little like moment of like hope that I was like, all right, like maybe this is where I'm supposed to be. And so I kind of agreed like to go and like
Yeah.
kind of jump into it blindly. So
Yeah. I was going to ask you, did you know in your heart that you needed help?
yeah, I think so. I think it's just, you just get so like you have those moments, of clarity in the midst of like the darkness and stuff where you're just like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I'm really not doing okay. And I
Yeah.
think I was just so tired of dealing with it. That I was just like, this can't be what life's supposed to be about. Like there's has to be more, I was missing out on so much like of my life. Like that was probably 6 months of just
Well,
I'm gonna
yeah,
say
you probably
wasted,
had
but
depression mixed in addition to the anxiety and all the other stuff. I'm sure there was depression kind of covering everything at that point as well. Plus, your body's not functioning
oh
the
yeah.
way that it's supposed to. You're not getting the nutrients you need. I mean, what that must have done to the way that you felt, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, definitely. I think it just got to a point where it's like there was so much like self-loathing and just like hate, like
Yeah,
self-hatred toward myself that it was just like nothing in my life brought me like joy. Even the things that even like, working out and like exercise, something that's so good and something that I obviously I have a career in and now like that, like I
yeah,
couldn't even find joy in that, but I did it anyway because it was just like, oh, like it just, you get so like just off, you just get off the rails in that sense. But yeah, it
yeah,
just you hit rock bottom, you're like, I need help, like I give up, like God take this, like almost like a let go, let God moment.
yeah. That's what it sounds like. What was the ride to Virginia like? What
It was
were you
probably
scared?
oh gosh, I was yeah, I was probably every single feeling you probably could name. It definitely was like probably the worst drive of my life. Just like scary. Yeah, it was because kind of like backing up, when we called, like when my parents called Bermuda Ranch, kind of explained the situation, asking if I could get in. It was like within 24 hours we packed the car and drove down there. So
Wow.
it was just like
Wow.
it was in an instant. I couldn't tell like my friends, family members, like everything. It was just we kind of packed and left, and like everyone else found out later. So it was just a very like in a moment like you don't have time to think, and then when you hit and you're in the car sitting for several hours, like that's when
Yeah.
everything hits you, and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
I cried a lot. I think probably. Just yeah, it just was very a very almost like solemn kind of ride down. I think my parents were just very like upset, but like, at peace like with what God had called them to, but then also just, you still struggle with it sometimes and faith
Yeah.
is scary and yeah, it definitely was tough, but I think I remember them just reassuring me like, God's in this, like you're gonna be okay, like we're with you, like
Yeah.
we'll get through this. Like, you just got to trust God. And, we want you to be healthy and happy again and like be the Carolyn that like like you're called to be. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it was definitely a mix. Definitely, yeah. One ride I will never forget. That's for sure.
I'm sure. What was it like there? Once you got assimilated and settled in,
hmm
what was that summer like for you?
Um, I always tell people it was probably the best summer of my life.
Wow.
Yeah, well, for one, I don't think I would like be here today without it. It
Yeah.
truly saved my life physically, but also was just a spiritual like salvation. I think that moment was like that summer. I like always like to refer to as my quote unquote salvation moment. Even though
Hmm.
I'd been a Christian, like I think that was when I really realized like, wow,
Yeah.
like faith is like I just grew so much in my faith and just realized like what it was um, but essentially was just this like inpatient place. It kind of like I feel like a lot of times people think when they think treatment centers, it's like more of like hospitals and like just I don't know like that kind of thing. But it was more of like a hotel in a sense where there's like bedrooms and like you roomed with like a bunch of girls and you're kind of just living there. It's almost like a retreat center in a sense. But
Yeah, that's cool. That
yeah, it was
sounds like it
definitely
would make you feel like at ease.
right. Yeah, exactly. It was definitely less like intimidating. And I think when I started, there were like probably 15 to 20 girls. There was a lot. And we just kind of spent like every day, like, you were supervised by like some, health technicians. And,
Hmm.
we were required to go to like, individual therapy sessions, group therapy. We did some art therapy, which was really cool because I actually still have a good bit of like some of the artwork that I did.
Oh,
Um,
that's awesome.
yeah, it was just a cool way of like, being able to kind of take everything in your head and kind of put it onto something and like create something with it.
Hmm.
And because it was like a Christian based center, like we had like Bible studies and like weekly worship. So it was an all encompassing just like treatment plan. It was tough. Like you were I was very restricted at first. So it was very much like just, I couldn't really do much. And,
Hmm.
it's just, they're trying to slowly like teach you like the skills to, I'll never forget. It's like they call it CCC. It's like catch it, challenge it, change it, and you catch the bad thought, you change the narrative of it, and then it's just so again, it was tough. It was tough work, day after
Yeah.
day. You kind of just have to keep like pushing through, and I think my competitiveness served me well in this because I felt like I was like, well, I'm gonna do this to the best of my ability. Like I've always been a hard worker, and so
Yeah.
I was just like, all right, like if I need to take this supplement to like, to get
Yeah.
more calories in, like I'm gonna do it and like I'm gonna choose to do it because a lot of the girls there, they would have feeding tubes that would
Uh-huh.
kind of like give them like their nutrients that they needed. But I was like, nope, I want to choose to like take it like myself.
That's
Like
awesome. You
make
were
it
able to use the thing that kind of had gotten out of whack and taken over for good. That's awesome.
yeah, it was so that's like a cool, yeah, it definitely was a cool
Yeah.
thing. But yeah, I was there for 2 months.
Hmm.
We actually had a week where my family came down. They called it Family Week, and so a bunch of other families came, and it was just a big kind of family group therapy session. And it was a
Wow.
really good moment of like my parents kind of seeing what I was doing, and the professionals there were trying to help them, like prepare them, like, all right, this is how like how to handle conflict and how to just be able to talk about some issues without making it this huge
Yeah.
issue. And but yeah, it was like it's so hard to describe like what happened like there that summer. And just like I said, I always look back on my journals and stuff and just kind of relive those experiences. But they just really did an amazing job with just incorporating faith into
It
everything.
sounds like it.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like what happened while you were there was a lot of healing. And
Oh,
you had community that
mhm.
understood you for the first time ever in all of this.
Yes. And I think that's one thing about like, not only just eating disorders, but like, any type of like illness is just sometimes it makes you feel so alone when you don't feel
Yeah.
like you have people to talk to who get it. And like, yeah, to be around some of those girls, like, some of those girls were from around like the country, but also other like across the world, like in different countries. So it was just
Yeah.
cool to be so connected to people and like to have faith be the center of it. It's like that summer, like I feel like I've always like gone back to that moment and being like, wow, like that was like a pivotal moment for my faith. And like, in the weeks, months, years, like after I left there, like any struggle I had or like a song that came on always like reminded me of like that moment in my life. So, it changed my perspective on everything.
That's that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah.
Now, what was it like coming back? Like when you left there, because that must have felt like a really safe place for you.
Oh yeah, it was definitely safe and definitely, like in your bubble and it's very controlled, which I love control. So coming out of that, yeah, I actually spent an extra month in Arizona with the same, treatment center. That was more of like a
Hmm.
step down place, not as intensive, just because I wasn't really at my goal weight and I didn't really want to go home with having that on my on my
Right.
conscience, just to like, all right, like let me just stay in treatment. So I chose to kind of like stay an extra month, which caused me to miss my first month of high school. So that was also hard
Oh, wow.
because when you come back, obviously
Yeah.
you look really different from when you left, but also people are like, where were you? Or like, what's going on? Like, and you're all freshmen in high school. So it's just a
Ugh.
weird time. So that was hard because it was just like, oh, I was like, I don't even know what I said on vacation or like vacation or yeah, I guess like I said I was on vacation and missed the first month of like high school. And obviously my closer friends I told and they knew what was
Right.
going on, but
Yeah.
definitely took a lot because you have to learn to really actually apply what you learned. And it's scary because, you're always scared to relapse and to go back
Yeah.
to those old behaviors. And, nothing's really protecting you from like those triggers that come in and out of your life.
Yeah.
But I think just, I kept seeing like my dietitian that I had seen before. We had found a therapist that was helping. So like I was like talking to her a little bit for maybe just 2, 3 years after, just to kind of stay on track and just kind of process things as I transitioned into real life. But ups and downs, I think I kind of rode the
Yeah.
high out of treatment a little bit. And so it was easy at first. And then,
Yeah.
life kind of hits and then it kind of, makes it a little bit harder. But, I think the biggest thing was just having, having my parents there and like, being able to learn, boundaries like with them and like with other people and like things that triggered me in life. So,
Yeah.
it's
Plus
just,
you had this deeper faith. You had all these
mhm,
tools in your tool belt that you learned. So you
yeah,
weren't in the same place all alone with no real resource to help you. You had multiple
yeah.
resources, and that's awesome. Now, something I wanted to ask you is, have you been able to help others that you could recognize are struggling with disordered eating because you know what to look for?
Yeah. I feel like I always kind of joke that I have like this like sixth sense and like I always just can kind of tell, or just know if someone's like
Yeah.
struggling. Just when you go through that, you just, yeah, you can connect to those people on a deeper level that no one else really can. I actually had the like privilege, like honestly, I think it was the first day back in high school in my one class, like a classmate, I like came into class, sat down, saw her, and just had noticed like again how much like weight that she had lost, and she looked just sickly, and like I was just like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, and so I was able to like talk to her, and just right away it was just like, wow, like God is like saying, hey, look, I brought you through this. Here's an opportunity to share what you've been through. So that was really cool. Um,
Yeah.
to see that. And yeah, I think just over the years, just being able, I think just the biggest thing has just been sharing my story and being vocal about it. I felt like I felt called to just share my story and to tell people what I've been through, which is scary and very vulnerable, but it's opened a lot of doors for, friends or friends of friends being like, hey, I saw your post or I saw you've gone through this. Like,
Hmm.
like someone who I know or my daughter is struggling with this. Like, it's opened a lot of like opportunities for me to share, which has been like so like life giving. I had
Yeah,
a
you get to
college,
be a resource
yeah,
to other people that are struggling.
yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I had a college teammate who I was rooming with, like she had struggled with it. So like just to be like I've just found myself like over the years like being in places where it's just like I don't know, had I not gone through that, like I wouldn't have been able to help like that person. And
That's
I've
right.
always just said like I try like I know it's like my story like and my struggle that I've gone through, but I've always tried to point people back to like, hey, like I went through this, but God brought the
Yes.
healing. Like it's all about
Yes.
him. And that's always been like my, passion like and desire like coming out of treatment. I was like, I'm gonna like just share God's story and just like share what he's done. And it gives it a new light. It doesn't give it as such of a like a dark, negative thing. I
Yeah.
mean, sure, it certainly doesn't change the trauma, but it changes like your perspective of it. And you're like, wow, like that hurt, but like I'm so much better for going through that. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's weird, isn't it, that some of our most traumatic times, I just had this conversation with someone the other day. I said, I wouldn't do it differently.
yeah.
I didn't enjoy going through it. It was horrible.
Yeah.
But that is what brought me my deep relationship with Jesus.
Oh
So
yeah.
I would never give it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it still brings me to tears sometimes, like when I look back and think about it. But yeah, like I said, like it's such like a pivotal moment, like in my faith. And yeah, I wouldn't
Yeah.
be here without it. So
Yeah. Now, do you still struggle with this?
yeah, I definitely do. It's not in like a concerning way, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I mean, I'm not perfect, there's still stuff that, especially being in fitness, I've
Yeah.
found recently that, a lot of people are caught up in those societal pressures to look a certain way, to diet, to do this and do that. And so it can be tough sometimes when people aren't like they don't know what I've gone through and they say things. But I think
Hmm.
just I've matured in the sense that like I know I don't ever want to get to that point again and that like that alone, like that kind of scares me and kind of like steers me back into, reminding myself of the truth. And, I think just, especially like more recently, just being able to be like thankful for my body, and the things that it can do rather than focusing on what it can't. Because,
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing now is like, I mean, body image is definitely a thing that's I still struggle with. And, I know a lot of people do. So, just being aware of that, which can be a burden sometimes. And I've definitely, expressed a lot of frustration that like, why do I still have to deal with this or think about things that people probably aren't thinking about? But, just being kind of adopting, like your podcast is a cup of gratitude, like being grateful for the things that like we have and not always
Yeah.
focusing on like what we don't, because that just puts us in like a negative place.
Yeah.
So, and just, I think just being honest with people and honest with myself, I think when you're honest about like what you're struggling with, like you don't feel like you have to hide, you can let that out. And so you can get help. Whereas like if you kind of keep it in, it's only going to get
Yeah.
bigger and bigger. So I think I've definitely learned that a lot.
Yeah, you're very authentic, and I think that I do see that you're so willing to share the vulnerable places, and in conversations we've had since we met each other,
Mhm.
you've been really okay with saying, "Hey, this I'm struggling right now," or "Hey, I could use prayer right now," and I do the same thing. And there's all, to get to the point where it's okay for you to say, I'm not perfectly in control right now, I don't know what's going to happen, or I'm not feeling great about this, I think is like one of the best places we can be.
Yeah. And like, I just know it always helps me. Like when someone's honest and vulnerable themselves, it makes
Yeah.
me like just spill out my guts too. Like, I'm just like, okay, if
Yes.
you're gonna share your struggles, well, here are all mine. It's so like it just connects you to people in different ways. That's just like, yeah, like I just want to be real with people and be like, hey, I go through
You,
this, or I struggle with this, like, and that's okay. So
I think you're so right. I used to always say it's like popcorn popping. When one person is
yeah,
brave, then all of a sudden everybody in the room is like, and me, and me, and me.
right.
It's
Yeah,
like, but it takes that one
it
person,
does. Yeah.
to start. Now, you go to therapy now. Is that helping you?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I started going like in the pandemic. More at first it was for like a breakup I was going through. But no, it's the best decision I've ever made. And you know, being involved like back in treatment and stuff, like going through with different therapists and things like that, like was great. But I think just I don't know, this experience with my current therapist like is just life changing. And I think just because I'm so different than I was back then, obviously, but it's just
Yeah.
like in the little time that like we've worked with each other, it's just I've learned so much like from my past, and I've been able to see like the trauma and like how it's connected to like my patterns of thinking and how I react to
Yeah.
certain things, and like how it's all connected. And I just like see my life in a different way. And so when like negative or triggering things like pop up, I'm allowed to like I feel like I have the skills and even the space with her to like feel the feelings but give myself grace for feeling them and being okay with like having those feelings. And we talk a lot about like your like inner child and like taking care of me
Hmm.
first, and
Hmm.
just helping like trying to like unlearn some of those like things I learned as a kid and just like finding freedom in that. And it's just yeah, it's helped in some really dark moments in like the last like year or so that we've been like working together. But it's a blessing from God, and like I'm so grateful for her. And just like it's given me even like the passion to even explore like psychology as like a career like down the road, which I'm like sure we'll talk about
That's
like later. But like
awesome.
it just
That,
gives me a desire to help other people like
yeah.
with mental health issues, like, and just make it more of like a normal thing. Like people are,
Yeah.
if people ask, I'm like, yep, I went to therapy today. Like I'm open about it. I don't try to hide it because it's so good. I think anyone can benefit
It
going.
is. It 100% should be normalized. I don't understand why, if somebody has cancer, we don't like have some kind of thought about judgment about what kind of
Right.
doctor they go to.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Mental health is health.
Yeah, it
And
is. And
I,
it's just you don't have to have anything like quote unquote wrong with you. Your life doesn't have to be
no,
burning up
you
and
don't. And my gosh,
complete.
we all
Yeah.
were still in a pandemic, people.
Oh yeah.
The most, people that think they're the most together, don't need anything, need mental health days.
Yeah,
Everybody right now is going through something unprecedented.
for sure.
And yeah, there isn't necessarily something quote unquote wrong with you. It's that you're trying to learn and understand how to be your best self, how to be healthy, how
Exactly.
to move through your life in a way that you can have the most joy and peace. What's wrong
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just my time with her has just like helped me just like see my life in like a different light, just kind of being like, oh, like that's why. And like it's helped me like in relationships. Like, I'm dating an amazing guy right now. And like it's that like my time in therapy has helped me prepare like for this relationship, and we're able to work through things because I have learned so much about just taking care of myself and being able to address like things. And it just, yeah, it's, I don't know. It's been definitely something I don't think I would have been able to get through like the last like year or so without.
Oh, that's
But yeah.
awesome. That's beautiful to hear all the growth that you've been able to
Yeah.
experience. Now, you told me that you had Lyme disease, and like on top of everything else, how did that affect you?
Yeah, it was 2021 was an interesting year. I kind of started off the year very injured from like a running injury, and that was a long, long months the first half of the year, which was tough in itself. But then yeah, so that's like a painful thing, and
Hmm.
working through that. And then in the summer I don't know. And for those of you, like, for people who don't know like what Lyme's is, it's just like, I mean, it's caused by the deer ticks, right? And it's, what's tricky about it is that everyone seems to have different like symptoms and reactions to it.
Hmm.
So my symptoms kind of started out with like migraine headaches and like just really like neck stiffness and like back like soreness. Almost like felt like I worked out like way too hard and like I'm just paying
Hmm.
for it. Like just I'm really stiff. And
Yeah.
um, but it was like relentless, and it was like all day, every day, like headaches, the pain, like I couldn't turn my head, in
Wow.
different directions. Like sleeping was hard because any light like touching, like if I would touch my head like in the lightest of ways, like it would just send like just this instant pain. So it was just
Wow.
like I couldn't like sleep, and it kind of just progressed. And no one knew what was going on. Like, I went to urgent care because I got like super dizzy and I almost like fell over in my bathroom the one morning. And she was like, oh, like, the person there was just like, it's just migraines. Here's some medication, just try to manage your stress and all that kind of stuff, which I kind of just laughed off because, that's, but, it's just like, I didn't know what was going on. I was like, this is like not, like I knew something else was wrong. Like,
Yeah.
in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, I have cancer. I was like, this is it. I'm dying. Like, it's just like your mind goes to these places because it just,
Yeah.
no one can see physically on the outside what's going on. It's all inside. And you're just like, I'm trying to
Hmm.
just, and in the job in fitness, I couldn't even like train clients without like, being able like not being able like to pick up dumbbells or it kind of
Yeah.
it was very paralyzing, like both like mentally and emotionally, but also like physically. Like I couldn't, yeah, like there was one point I remember like I feel like my whole body went like numb. Like it was just, I
Wow.
lost sensation, like my joints were all, it was, yeah, it was terrible. And like I think it was again a very another like a rough time in my life. I was very like in a low place and just was in just so much pain all the time that I felt like just completely just helpless. And
I
again, to
bet.
not, yeah, to not know what was going on was just like the worst part of it too.
So can I ask, did that make you angry with God, or did you run towards him?
I think in this instance, I definitely ran towards him. I think he was like my only like anchor
Yeah.
in this. I was just like, God, like I don't know what to do. This hurts, like this sucks, and like I'm
Yeah.
scared, but you know, I need you. Like I need you in this. And there's that song, I can't think of like who sings it. Oh, maybe like Riley Clemens, I think, or something. It's called Broken Prayers, right? So
Hmm.
it's a beautiful song, but it's just like, yeah, I feel like I just prayed to him and talked to him just in this broken form that I was. It's just like, God, like take this away from me.
Yeah.
Like, crying myself to sleep every night. Like I think he was the only one who saw me like in that moment. I think it kind of changed my perspective on him too, of like, hey, God, like God suffers with us, right? Like I think sometimes we think
Yeah.
God is just like up on his throne and he's just like, okay, like yeah, I'll help you, but he like actually like has felt everything that we felt. He's gone through what we've gone through, and like
Yeah.
goes through that stuff with us. So I think that was comforting, even though like I was in so much pain. But yeah, it definitely, yeah, it was hard, but I think I'm grateful for the way that my like faith has grown to be able to get to a point where like in that moment, like I turn to
Yes.
him instead of away from him.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. And honestly, I'm so sorry that you had to go through any of this, but to have to go through something like that after coming through such a long, difficult trial.
Yeah.
Now, how do you feel now? Have you
Yeah, I
gotten
mean,
things resolved?
I think so. Sometimes I like add a question mark to that because I ended up getting like rashes and that's what was like a clear sign of Lyme. So the doctor gave
Hmm.
me like antibiotics. I got like blood work done. Sure enough, it showed up and it's definitely, I mean, within a few days like the antibiotics like really kicked in and like my symptoms went from like, 100 to like 0. Which was a blessing. It was a huge thing, like and relief, but I don't think it's definitely it might still be there because I think it's an autoimmune disease. So,
Yeah.
it's there's times where I feel like I get flare-ups, especially when, like I'm stressed or like
Yeah.
anxious and like those internal things kind of like I get like similar pain like, throughout my body that I'm like, ooh, this is familiar. Like, is
Hmm.
it Lyme's? But again, it's all manageable and it's one of those things where it's like, all right, am I really anxious? Like how can I kind of like calm myself down and just like try to find like a time to like relax and that kind of helps it too. Again, talking it out in therapy sometimes helps to like process what's going on. But
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely is not, it's definitely not as severe as it was before, which is great. So,
Yeah. Glad to hear that. Now, you currently coach high school girls, but
mhm.
as you alluded to earlier in the conversation, and definitely when we were talking in our pre recording call, you've been considering sports psychology.
Mhm.
How's that make you feel?
It's definitely, well, I'm definitely excited about it. It makes me excited because I think until like recently, I've just, this desire has just kind of like formulated in like my head and my heart. And I truly see like God being like, okay, like here's where like I'm calling you to go. What connected us, like Amanda, is that arrow, that you were talking
Yeah.
about, like an arrow, and just listening to that and like literally the day before you released that, like feeling that like image, like seeing that image in my head and feeling that in my heart of like God being, all right, I'm pulling you, like I've been pulling you back through certain things, but this is where you're like I'm like shooting you. This is where I'm aiming you because I've called you here, and so that's a huge thing. I was like, all right, like what does this mean? So I think, I mean, I love coaching. I love working with athletes and being an athlete my entire life. It's just in me. It's like ingrained in like
Yeah.
who I am, and I want to like I just have I've always had a desire to help people, and so I want to be able to be a source of encouragement to people, whether it's high school, college, just help people like know that they're like not alone in things that they are struggling with, and with going through several like pretty major injuries, even like the Lyme's,
Hmm.
as well, like I saw the effect on my like my mental health, and
Yeah.
I want to come alongside people who are in those like people who are injured and playing a sport and don't know what to do without it, and again being in a position back in 8th grade where I wasn't able to have sports, which is who I was like. So just seeing how so much of my life from like 8th grade till now has all kind of tied into this, like, oh wow, like
Yeah.
this is something
It's
I
like
could
a
do.
beautiful redemption
Yeah.
of all of that. And for those of you who don't know, so I have put together a video series.
Hmm.
Since all of my podcasts don't have video, I thought for the new year I would do something different. And it was called Like an Arrow. And Carolyn had seen it just at, this timing that, she was feeling like she was being stretched and pulled backwards. And, it's just really cool to see how God will use everything, because for me, it was a big affirmation
Hmm.
that I heard him right what to call it and what to ask people. And for her, it was this confirmation. And it's something that really helped us connect more deeply after we had originally been connected. And um, it's just really cool how God will do that. He's going to be like, okay, I want you to know that person. So
Yeah.
here, you do that, you do that. Okay, there.
Yeah,
And
it's crazy.
yeah, it's pretty amazing. It kind of blew me away when you told me that. And just this thought of how I love looking for the thread of Jesus in our lives and to see how God was there in all these different ways and how he uses everything and he won't waste anything,
Hmm.
even things that nobody wanted to happen, him included. They still happened. We live in a fallen world, but he's not gonna waste it. He's gonna use it. That's
Yeah.
exciting to me,
Yeah.
because you've been through so much for you would have so much to give.
Yeah. And like I think, with like athletics and stuff, there's always that, that temptation for like disordered eating and stuff too. So it's just like it's just
Hmm.
like just so many different ways like I feel like I can use like my gifts and talents as like a coach,
Yeah,
and just working through like eating disorders and just being in the fitness field and just having that desire, like it's just all like coming together, and it's like super exciting and definitely scary. And I think, I mean, I recently texted you for prayer for like faith, because I feel like this really, I don't know, I got a really good opportunity like presented to me, for like a new kind of like a jump to like a side
hmm,
career, and it might
cool.
involve giving up, what I'm currently doing, and that's a huge step in faith, because there are a lot of unknowns. But I think I've never felt so like confident in what God is calling me to do. Like I feel like,
Yeah,
no matter what everyone else is like saying, or I feel like I'm gonna get from people, like I know in my heart that this is something that, like, I don't know, I'm on to something. Like, and God's like up to something here, and I want to kind of keep like exploring it with like curiosity, kind of like a child, like kind of being like, all right, like this is exciting, like let's just do it, like just jump in. Like why would I hesitate if it looks good and it feels safe and it's something I desire? Like I don't want to like
I have
waste
the
that
biggest
opportunity.
I have the biggest smile on my face right now hearing you talk. I mean, it's just like to see like the life that God has brought out of all of that, and to see that, yeah, that childhood that you missed out on, like you didn't, because this is exciting being a
Yeah.
Christian and following God's lead on the plans he has for your life. It's exciting, and what he
Yeah.
has planned for you is going to be the most fulfilling life that you could ever think of. Like what you think is good, he's got what's better.
Yeah.
And it just to hear you talk that way is very it's making me smile. It's very exciting. And honestly, you have so much to offer. And what you have now, like everything you've described,
Hmm.
when you started talking about sports psychology and whatever this next step is, what you have is a ministry. He took
Yeah.
the things in your life, he's turning them into ministry, into something that's going to have lasting positive effect in people's lives and for his kingdom. And you're going to be somebody that helps people heal.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I just, kind of like I said back, earlier on, like I just want God to get the glory. Like that's all I want. Like He's done so much for me, and like the least I feel
Hmm.
like I can do is just give it back to Him and just be able to be like a light for people and to help them feel that they're not alone, and that like they are loved and appreciated and valued, and they are enough. Because it's that, like when you realize that, it's so healing. And
Amen.
yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? They're the people he wants to use. The ones that
Yeah.
don't. All they want to do is like let people know what they've found. You
Yeah,
know.
exactly. Yeah.
Now, if you could give anyone struggling with disordered eating any advice right now, what would that be?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, is just to tell them like you're not alone. You may not have people immediately around you who might be struggling or understand, but it doesn't make you alone. Having disordered eating, definitely tries to convince you that you are, but you aren't. So, if there's someone out there that's listening, like I see you and I hear you, and like I'm there for you. And I think I just encourage them to just find people in your life who can listen and be a support and not always try to fix things.
Yeah, yeah,
And just to come alongside you if you need a hug, just to be someone who you can hug and just cry with, or if you're angry, you need to let it out, like someone who can share in that anger with you. Like I think that was the biggest, like a big thing for me, is just to have people who, didn't, weren't always trying to like fix me, but just love me like in my
Mm-hmm.
mess and in that
Mm-hmm.
pain is huge.
Yeah.
Um, and just like giving yourself grace, knowing that it's not going to be easy or perfect.
Yeah.
Like I said, like I still struggle with it. Some days are harder than others, but just knowing that like it's the ups and downs of, and just trusting that process and just, there is hope to find freedom in that. There's a bunch of resources too. Finding a therapist or a dietitian or someone who can kind of help guide you along and like some of your thoughts. And
Yeah.
there's this organization called just the National Eating Disorders Association. You know, that's a huge resource too that I follow, and they post some really good stuff. So that's always a way to turn to as well. But yeah,
I think that's awesome advice. And actually, in the show notes, if you'll share those things with me,
yeah.
the center that you went to
Hmm.
in Virginia and the place you're talking about now, any resources that you think would be helpful, let's put them in the show notes. So if
Yeah,
somebody is struggling, they have some place to start.
yeah, definitely.
Okay, awesome. And then this is my favorite question. If you listen, I always ask it because I just love the answers. If you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
I love thinking about like my younger self. She drives a lot of what I do, and I feel like I fight for her every day. But I just would tell her like how much like how loved she is, and that she doesn't have to strive like to be someone else. That she's enough who she is, and she's
Hmm.
worthy of love and is accepted, even with flaws, imperfections, everything. That God sees her and knows her, and that's all that matters. And just to live free and just to, like and live in the grace that God's given her, but also like to give to herself that grace too.
Oh, that's awesome. That's powerful. I love that advice. Everyone should take that advice. Well, Carolyn, I am just so glad that we were able to do this, and excited for what's coming for you because I know it's going to be good. I love to see how God will come alongside someone who's willing to go and send them somewhere, and that's what I see for you. You're saying, "Here I am. I'll go," and once you do that, hold on, it's going to be like a
Yep.
really really cool ride, but you're going to bless so many along the way. I just know, and I'm so glad that we've gotten to know each other, and we'll continue um, to be friends. I think that's awesome now that you're part of the podcast family. My door's always open. I'll always answer the phone. I always tell everyone, I don't care, you text me, call me at 3 a.m, I'm here. So I just hope you have an amazing day. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have the biggest smile on my face, and that definitely warmed my heart. So I appreciate the opportunity, and just I'm so blessed by this platform that you have. So yeah, I'm praying for you, and as you can continue to just bless the lives of others too.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a big encouragement getting to know you and just to
Likewise.
see, what God can do, right?
Yep.
Isn't he
Exactly.
amazing? So good.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you have an amazing day.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. If you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.